You know, a couple of years ago, this would have been a eulogy. Silent Hill was in the ground. No new games, no announcements, just endless poor decisions from Konami that would leave one of gaming's most iconic horror franchises dead and buried. And yet, here we are. In the last few years, we've had new games, remakes, even some weird experimental stuff that isn't dumb garbage. So in honor of this miraculous reanimation, I want to take a gander at every single Silent Hill game ever made so that we may compare some of the new stuff to the historical highs we all know and love. But also, it's Halloween, so it's got to be scary. Just make sure you don't enjoy it too much. When Silent Hill is bad, it's really bad. You know when a series disappears for years, but eventually has some kind of revival that feels a bit too conceptual to read too much into? Yeah, that's how The Short Message feels, an unsurprisingly short game that dabbles with a few nice ideas, but they end up getting overwhelmed by shoddy design and some awful creative decisions. There's buckets of trauma in here, but it's also shallow and kind of offensive, I suppose. Like, we've got characters whose entire traits are mental illness. Silent Hill as a name deserves better. Silent Hill Book of Memories feels like no one who made it has ever played Silent Hill before. They've turned slow psychological horror into an isometric dungeon crawler with loot boxes and XP bars. It's like Diablo, except everyone's really sad. It's not an awful idea, and I kinda like side stories that exist almost exclusively for lore expansion, but we are clearly very far removed from Silent Hill now. You got zero atmosphere, no chance of anything scary, and I don't even see any fog! I usually like weird genre experiments, but Book of Memories doesn't work for me. Have you ever walked past one of those light gun cabinets in an arcade and thought, oh yeah, this is the perfect format for emotional trauma and existential dread? Well, Konami did, and that's why we have Silent Hill the Arcade, which does a spectacular job of taking all the tension from other Silent Hill games and replacing it with shooting ghosts in the face. It's not horrendous, and hey, it's a light gun arcade game, so at the very least it's like House of the Dead, but with more like a Silent Hill-like. If you're playing a game like this, it could be worse things than Silent Hill. Look, there's even some fog. Nowadays, mobile game means microtransactions and idling, I don't know. But when Silent Hill The Escape came out, your average mobile game was less fun than writing the word boobs on a calculator. The Escape could have been really good, but instead you move your character through these first-person mazes by awkwardly tilting your phone. Because if the controls are bad, they're at least still immersive, right? Every maze looks the same, and every monster takes ages to kill, so even the faintest glimmer of a scary atmosphere soon takes a back seat to boring jank. With normal controls, maybe this game stood a chance. If you didn't know better, you might not understand how an HD collection of two games we will no doubt see much later on could possibly be so far down in the ranking. Well yeah, the Silent Hill HD collection should have been the perfect way to preserve these two titans of horror, but instead it feels like someone tried to remaster one of those haunted VHS tapes. There's new voice acting, which cuts through a lot of the eerie awkwardness, the atmosphere is virtually non-existent, and who the fuck vacuumed up all my fog? I want names, I want them now. The scariest part of this collection are all the technical issues that plague your average playthrough. This is a mind-blowingly terrible collection, please steer clear. Remember Silent Hill Arcade being more action-based? Well, Silent Hill Homecoming is even more of an action game. You play as a soldier who returns home and sees how foggy and traumatic everything is, which is a fun setup, but seeing as he's well trained for this mission, there's not the same level of awkward, terrifying stumbling from corner to corner that you'd expect. A lot of combat rolls and quick-time events, because Resident Evil 4 was a game that did really well, and clearly Homecoming needs to be more like that. It feels very 2000s and not really in a good way, and it kind of reminds me of the Silent Hill movies. I don't want to rank those as well. I'm just going to say they're both terrible and move on. Not content with the Escape's imprecise controls propping up the mobile market, Konami went back in with Silent Hill Orphan, or Silent Hill Mobile as it's called in the boring place known as Europe. Without distracting controls, these games are kind of okay. I reckon Silent Hill Mobile 2 should go first, since this one's a little clumsier in execution, but it's got this low-res charm to it that actually fits Silent Hill kind of perfectly. Tonally, we're right on the money, and that is half the battle with these games. Do you want more mobile game? Oh yeah, Silent Hill Mobile 3 is a pretty polished game, to be honest. I guess it should be as the last word in this trilogy, but I would call this a safe game. It's a little more put together than Mobile 2, but it's definitely running on empty at this point. Or I am, because I emulated all 3 of these games back to back and I was ready to stop about halfway through this one. Honestly, I wish I could go back to a time when Silent Hill Mobile was wowing me for how much game there was for such a simple concept. It's rough around the edges for sure, but there's something raw and unsettling about how stripped down it is. The pixelated visuals, the claustrophobic perspective, the way it hints at a bigger world with almost no resources, it all works. It's proof that atmosphere matters more than graphics, and sometimes being limited makes a game more Silent Hill, not less. Silent Hill Downpour is so very close to being a great game. The concept is excellent. You're an escaped prisoner who's done some shit, and you've wound up in Silent Hill, except now it rains when bad things happen. It's a great idea since the weather reacts in an organic way which helps bring your environment to life, which is never a bad idea in a horror game. Downpour is let down by the technical limitations of its time, since the frame rate feels like walking through a swimming pool and those loading screens seem to last forever. Still though, huge credit for chasing atmosphere over jump scares. That is the Silent Hill playbook. I'm learning from this video that Silent Hill has done surprisingly well on handhelds. The Silent Hill mobile games are pretty impressive, and Origins is really good for a PSP game. Obviously there's some limitations to consider, so the controls are a little clunky and the maps are super small, but everything you'd need to make a good Silent Hill game is here in good quantities. It sets a good, scary mood, and Travis is an enjoyable protagonist, which absolutely isn't a guarantee for this franchise. Never take a shortcut when that shortcut is through Silent Hill. That's like extra common sense. Do you remember when they made a Silent Hill game for the Wii? I know, strange times, but they did, and what's more, Shattered Memories is a reimagining of the first Silent Hill, but with some very creative decisions sprinkled throughout. The most divisive change was removing all of the combat, so you've just got to run away from the monsters, which can be a bit repetitive and starts to lose steam towards the end, but it helps shift Shattered Memories towards being more of a psychological, slow-burning horror game. It's experimental, and for the most part, a successful experiment. Also, the story gets weird, and I like that. I'm inclined to hate Silent Hill 4 since it doesn't actually take place within the town of Silent Hill. However, it gets a pass because its premise is so strong. You're trapped in your apartment and the world outside is quickly deteriorating, and this found particular relevance during COVID-19 as the prospect of getting cabin fever became all too real. The Room is a very inconsistent game though. The second half really drags hard, and the approach to combat clearly wasn't something the devs cared too much about. It is a fascinating game though, and I'd love to see it revisited one day. The original Silent Hill is like gaslighting the video game. Visually this game is a bit of a mess and looks every day of those 26 years old, but hopefully you've learned by now that lo-fi Silent Hill to study to is the way to go, and holy shit, they just don't make them like this anymore. It's got the same kind of vibes as early Resident Evil, a bizarre setting with less than perfect voice acting that fully ramps up the psychological horror. Nowhere feels safe and nowhere feels normal, so you can't really get a grounding. The few moments that are more overtly scary or even just heartbreaking would later become incredibly iconic moments within the series, so it's the value of picking the right timing. The entire reason for this video is the recent release of Silent Hill F, a game that goes to show that if you want this franchise to be at its best, you've got to keep the horror Japanese and not necessarily Western. This game is bold at a time when this franchise needed something strong to get back on track, and with writing led by Ryukiski07, who has written a ton of amazing horror, Silent Hill F manages to be this achingly beautiful game set against this drastically different backdrop. It might not feel like Silent Hill the whole time, and some of the mechanics are a little half-baked, but the horror in this one is some of that premium shit that we haven't seen in this franchise for a very long time. I am traumatized and impressed, and I would like the supervision of a trained adult next time, thank you. I almost feel like I was too lenient with the Silent Hill HD collection earlier, because I need to reiterate that the 2 games in that collection are fucking masterpieces. The slightly more debatable of the 2 would have to be Silent Hill 3, where I can imagine if you're like an unreasonable bellend, you might debate its qualities. What this game is relentlessly disturbing. Poor Heather Mason wanted a nice day out but instead got bombarded with psychological horrors, the likes of which the mind cannot truly comprehend. Silent Hill 3 is so dark and sometimes mean-spirited, which can cause the story to stall in place, but it makes up for that with one of the best atmospheres in the franchise. It also has the biggest mic drop moment in the series, which I still haven't properly recovered from. Good God, man. A smart man would combine Silent Hill 2 with its remake and just spend longer talking about Silent Hill 2 in general, but as a famously stupid person who was a little worried that a developer who had made some average horror games before remaking Silent Hill 2 might not be super qualified for this task, I am very happy being wrong and not smart. The odds weren't in Bloober's favour though. How could they possibly remake a game this unconventional? Well, they did, and they did a superb at bringing over the atmosphere and the haunting lighting in a way that modernizes graphically without sanding away any of the edges. Some of the awkward charm has been replaced by this professional veneer of a remake, but Bloober fully understood the assignment here, and there is a reason why they're remaking the first Silent Hill at some point. Take the wheel, and I'm sorry for ever doubting you. At some point in time, and with everything that has happened since, and with Silent Hill looking like a somewhat healthy franchise again, you'd think that I'd be over PT by now, but I just can't do it. This thing is like some mythical creature, like a manticore or the Loch Ness Monster or my dad, and it's been long enough now that this feels like a dream, like a ghost. It's this impossible thing that literally doesn't exist anymore that still haunts everyone who played it. PT is psychological torture dressed up as one looping hallway, where every sound, every flickering light is conspiring against you and just waiting to launch your heart rate into triple digits. I still believe this is the scariest game I've ever played, and if this potential was realized in any way, it would be runaway top of the class. Never forget what was taken from us. There are a few very good reasons why people still talk about Silent Hill 2 more than 20 years later. The best kind of horror isn't as tangible as rounding the corner to a jump scare. It's this overwhelming feeling of dread and anxiety that envelops you wherever you go, like fog. James Sunderland's journey through Silent Hill is quiet, slow, and intensely uncomfortable, as this game continuously hits you with both barrels filled with perfectly crafted symbolism and the growing understanding that everything in Silent Hill 2 serves one ultimate purpose. Things like Pyramid Head are obviously supernatural in nature, but the overarching theme of this game is deeply human and really does boil down to one man and his overwhelming guilt. It is the benchmark for psychological horror, and no other Silent Hill game has come close to this. We may never get something this good again.